let's say we have a cave, okay, and we all have our plots in the cave, right? So I have my plot of land, you have your plot of land, our neighbor has a plot of land, okay, and we're all staying in that one cave. And now basically our neighbor starts to start an engine, starts to run an engine on his plot of land, and is basically polluting the air and constantly poisoning the basically all three of us. What's going on there, basically?
Pardon me. So what's going on there is that the neighbor, let's say it's pumping out about a suit or something, and this suit is coming and like dirtying your clothes and making you cough and everything like that. So he is trespassing those particles of soot onto your
What is
property.
suit? What is suit?
It's like the carbon residue, like the smog, the smoke, which comes out
Yeah.
of
Okay.
like
Okay.
a dirty generator.
Yeah.
So he's trespassing all these particles onto other people, onto their property. And this literally actually happened during the Industrial Revolution, where there'd be these factories pumping out all the soot,
Yeah.
and it would like, there was a literal case like this where it dirtied an old lady's laundry. She'd clean all her clothes, she'd hang them out to dry, and she'd
Yeah.
get back to them and be clean and dirty, like
Mm-hmm.
sorry, dry and dirty. They'd be infested with all this soot, right? And they were able to track down the specific factory that the soot came from,
Mm-hmm.
and they would make an injunction against the factory. Hey, you're not allowed to pollute this old lady
Mm-hmm.
anymore. So they had to install these special filters into the factory chimneys so that they wouldn't pump out any soot. It would just be like clean, like steam or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could do something similar in this case. And, in fact, the factory stopped caring about pollution. You know when it was? When the Environmental Protection Agency came along, and they started giving out licenses to different factories that
Okay.
they have a
Wait.
certain amount of pollution they're allowed to do, rather
So
than being based on property rights.
who decides basically that now we can stop? So if I understand you correctly, we can't stop our neighbor. Me and you, we can stop our neighbor from running his engine.
We'd be allowed to do that. Like
Okay.
if they're polluting our property, we'd be like, hey, stop fucking doing that,
Yeah.
or we're gonna defend our property, up to the point of shooting you in the face.
Got you. And uh, so now the question is, what if he's just farting a lot?
Does that damage our property? Does that interfere with our property?
I mean, it is kind of a nuisance, right? So it is like it smells horribly the whole day, right? It's like you want to eat something, you almost have to vomit every time you want to eat something. It is like making your life miserable. Let's put it like that. There is no health damage, basically.
I mean, so how is this cave like tiny?
I mean, it is the size where it is a size where this would happen.
Okay, so it's like some very tiny cave with a very flatulent man.
Or he's
Yeah.
just a very he's just farting like crazy.
So if you could show like this is initiating a conflict with how you are using your, like, maybe it was a very nice smelling cave before he came along, and you were cultivating a flower shop in there, and then he came along and he ruined your flower shop because every customer comes in and goes, "Oh, these flowers stink," and then they go away or whatever. So he's like, initiating a conflict that way. I mean,
My question,
possibly,
my,
yeah,
my
but again, it would require a judge to come in and answer the specific case
yeah, based
because
on
this isn't literally happening, so I can't literally answer.
what would a nuisance that is basically like, so basically what we have is an activity that has some negative externality to basically outside property, right? But then the question would be, to at what point are we allowed to intervene there, right? And
When it initiates a conflict.
But the question is what the conflict is, right? So in the case of, I think you would agree with that. In the case of the generator, you would say that that we could count that as aggression and as a conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of farting, you were like, I'm not so sure, right?
Well, because farting is very, very minimal.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You have to imagine hold on,
man.
So you have to imagine a very crazy scenario for it to become aggression, like a very tiny cave where he's a really, real big farter, and then it maybe can become aggression after a certain point. And that's why I said
that's all I'm saying.
You'd need to bring the judge in, and like I can't say it from here in my armchair. I can't tell you that point. I can't give you the only threshold I can give you is when it becomes aggression. All right.
Okay, when does it become aggression? Like, what's the threshold?
When
what's
it initiates
the criteria?
conflict.
Yeah, but that's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So what would be that threshold? Like, if I ask you what's the aggression, and you say when the conflict happens, that's not an answer.
Like I've told you what a conflict means, so you should know what it.
But in one case,
when I say when it initiates a conflict, that's when I'm going to prohibit it.
Yeah, but my question is, when do we determine that that has happened? What criteria do we use in order to determine that?
The criterion is the non-aggression principle.
When do we determine that it was aggression?
You investigate the case and see if it initiated a conflict.
Man, like, are you like, either I'm like completely not understanding, I'm like completely losing, like, I don't know what's happening right now. So I'm asking you, in one case, like, aggression and conflict is like the same thing, right? Like the threshold for when it becomes aggression
is the initiation of conflict.
Yes. So if I'm asking you when does it become aggression, and you say,
well, I
when it's conflict, doesn't make any sense.
So again, I can't tell you that.
Then say that, but don't say that it's.
I did say that.
Wait, but you're saying
I said that multiple times. And I can't tell you the specific amount of farts that can be pumped out before it becomes aggression. I told you that I can't give you that specific limit.
Yeah, and I believe
you have to have the judge there to look at the specifics of the case.
And I
told you that multiple times.
Yeah, and I believe that there is no objective threshold, that it's basically a matter of.
There is an objective threshold. It's called the non-aggression principle.
But what we're trying to find out is the threshold to what is an aggression and what isn't. Like, we're looking at the fart.
It's when it initiates a conflict.
Man,
look
like,
at whether
you don't let
a conflict.
You really don't have difficulties letting me talk.
I agree. I don't have difficulties letting you talk.
You really do have, I said.
No, you did.
Bro, what I'm trying to find out is, at what point is it aggression? And you say a judge has to decide. And I'm asking, like, what would be a criteria for a judge to look at this? Like, what objective metric? Man, I'm not done yet. When I'm asking you, we're trying to find out what aggression is, which one is aggression and which one isn't, and you say he's finding it out by the non-aggression principle, that's what he's trying to find out, whether it is aggression or not. He's not trying to find out whether aggression is correct or not. The non-aggression principle just tells us whether aggression is correct or not. It says no, aggression is not correct. But the non-aggression principle doesn't tell us what is classified as an aggression.
So the judge would go, hey, is a conflict being initiated or not? Because he knows what a conflict is. Namely, a conflict is mutually exclusive actions. And he goes, hey, is there a conflict? Yes, there's a conflict. Okay, who initiated this conflict? And just from those are the first principles of how he could work this out.
But in one case, you say there is a conflict, and in the other case, we could just dial this more down from farts to noise and to whatever. So the idea of conflict is the same idea as aggression. Like, the question of if someone is basically, if we have the right to stop him from doing that is directly tied to the question of, is that aggression or not? And I don't think that there is an
Yeah.
objective answer. There is no objective answer to whether that's the case or not. The only thing we can
Hold
do
on.
to, there is no way to resolve, basically objectively resolve this conflict. And the only way we can do that, in my opinion, is by getting an agreement over a rule basically that is arbitrary to a certain extent, and the least we want to get it the least arbitrary as possible, because I agree arbitrary is shit. So therefore we vote on it, and then basically the rules dictate how much basically pollution is allowed and how much farting is allowed. And then we would basically agree on what aggression is. At the moment someone crosses that line, it's aggression. At the moment someone doesn't, it's fine.
Let's take the other end of the extreme here. You presumably don't want to be killed, but I come up to you and I stab you in the neck and kill you. Was there any aggression there? Did I initiate any conflicts over the use of your body?
Yes, I would say so, yeah.
But hold on, I thought you just said there is no objective answer to if there is aggression.
Yeah.
So there is no objective answer to if I initiated conflict over your body when I stab you in the neck.
Yeah. Because I have set a certain.
That's insane. That is ludicrous.
Why? There is a certain
Clearly,
threshold. Listen,
just as you previously acknowledged, clearly I have initiated conflict there, because you immediately answered, yes, of course I initiated a conflict over your body when I run up to you and stab you in the neck. Obviously, when we take it to the other end of the stream, clearly there can be an objective answer to if there's aggression. So we can apply this to different cases. It is possible to figure out if there has been an aggression.
Bro, I hope you're going to let me speak. Will you let me speak? The fact that I can answer the question whether it's aggression or not is not telling you anything about whether I'm coming to that in an objective way or not. There is no correlation there whatsoever. I have just arbitrarily said that blowing some wind towards you is not aggression, and punching you is aggression. Somewhere between these two things, I have drawn a line, and also we societally have drawn a line and have said, okay, at this point it becomes illegal. At this point we say, no, this is aggression. So we've just arbitrarily drawn a line at some point, right? And we have done so, like, not, that's why I say it's not really arbitrary, it's like pseudo-arbitrary, in the sense that we all basically vote on it to a certain extent, and we all basically have an understanding, a societal understanding of what this threshold is, and we exercise that societal understanding, right? And in the same way, and in your system, basically, we could swap this societal understanding when it comes to private property, when it comes to clearly things that we can only control. So when it comes to my body, I could just say, okay, something else is aggression, right? Like the moment you touch my body, I disallow that, right? But for stuff like air and noise and pollution and stuff like that, it's not that easy. In that sense, we basically have to come to a common understanding of what is acceptable and what is not, and what is counted as aggression and what is not.
So, I blow up the entire universe. The entire universe is destroyed. I rip a hole in the space-time continuum, whatever, right? Would it be arbitrary to say that this initiates conflict? Because, like, either it initiates conflict or it doesn't. Would you agree with that?
Through my lens, yes, it would be arbitrary. Like the threshold is arbitrary. Like where you start, it's arbitrary. It's pseudo arbitrary in the sense that we agree upon it.
So would you agree that either that initiates conflict or it doesn't?
I think that it's a spectrum. I don't think that it's a binary. And if you want to turn a binary in a
Where is the
spectrum,
excluded middle?
if you want to turn a spectrum into a binary, you have to put a threshold, and that threshold is always to a certain extent arbitrary.
But even if you have a threshold, either it's going to be initiating a conflict or it isn't.
Yeah, either it's going to be above that threshold or below that threshold. That's what you mean, right?
Okay, so either this initiates conflict or it doesn't. Can we agree on that?
If you want to make a binary out of it, yes. Like, I don't think that, like, anything in nature, like doing something in nature, some state of the matter, like in nature, right, is always on a spectrum. If you look at it from whatever angle you look at it, it's always on a spectrum. You can now put a threshold on it and make a binary out of it. But what's actually the case in nature is always a spectrum.
Which end of the spectrum do you think blowing up the entire universe would be? Do you think it would be kind of on the edge? It's kind of a edge case?
No.
So you were able to identify that it's not an edge case. But apparently, it's just impossible to know. Maybe it's all edge cases, but clearly,
Bro, do you know what we're talking
there are
about right now?
clear aggressions.
What are we? Why are we talking about this? Can you just tell me?
The reason why we're talking about this is because you think that there is no objective answer to if there is an aggression, because sometimes there are edge cases. Okay, well then let's just take a non-edge case. Me
No,
blowing up the entire
that's not
universe, and you're like
that's not
so
true.
hesitant to admit that this clearly causes some conflicts.
Wait,
At least some.
I asked you to repeat why we're talking about this, and I don't think that
That's
your
what I
answer
did.
I don't think your answer was correct. So the reason why we're talking about this is because I am presenting you cases where you are not able to directly answer where you would put the threshold. And when I ask you where to put the threshold, like
I
I'm saying,
explain why.
wait, I'm saying that this is on a spectrum and that my putting of a threshold will always be arbitrary to a certain extent when we don't count in the voting and societal things in there. You are claiming that your threshold is objective. And then I'm asking you, using what objective criteria would you determine that threshold? You saying a judge would do that or something doesn't change anything. Like, what objective criteria would the judge use to put this threshold there?
Okay, so I'm gonna try and get at this from another angle. What objective criteria did you use to
None.
come up with this fact that I'm wrong because of this threshold problem? What criteria did you use to come to that fact?
I'm just using my logic.
Okay, logic.
I'm just looking at
Okay.
what you wait. I'm just let me answer. I'm just looking at what you're saying and comparing it to other stuff that you're saying, and I'm seeing inconsistencies. That's what I'm doing.
Sorry, I'm just writing it down.
Sure.
Okay, so, and what is the threshold of inconsistencies in my language that you require to determine that I'm incorrect?
I don't think that these are empirical judgments that I'm doing there. These are basically just completely analytical and a priori things that I'm doing there. There is nothing observable.
So you already knew that I was wrong before the debate.
No, they just basically don't. I don't need experience.
But you said
like,
a priori.
No.
So
I don't.
So without experience, you knew I was wrong.
Yes, without experience, I can see that you're wrong. Because basically,
how did you do that without experience?
Because I just take the words and the meanings of what you're saying.
Whoa! How did you get the words and the meanings?
Yeah, obviously those I got from experience.
So obviously you did get it from experience.
Bro, do you know what that, like, you know, I think you have pretty good philosophy education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like getting to certain facts of the matter, like if when Kant talks about a priori judgments, when he talks about a priori, I'm saying judgment, but like when he's saying that a
The
bachelor.
things that Kant
Wait.
believes
Let
that
me let me
a
please
priori
finish.
is not any
Let
specific thing.
me please finish. So when I say that a bachelor is unmarried, and when I say that this is an a priori statement, does it make any sense for you to say, yeah, but how did you hear the word bachelor? Does that make any sense?
Yes, it makes plenty
It
of sense.
makes absolutely no sense.
The things that Kant thinks is a priori, i.e., innate, is innate forms of perception. He doesn't think that there is any such thing as innate content, right? That is what the dogmatic rationalists were trying to get across. They thought there was such thing as innate content of consciousness. Kant said, no, this doesn't work, and the skeptics poked so many holes in that. There is no possibility of innate content. Kant had it that there was innate forms of perception. The things which Kant thinks is a priori is the way in which you perceive things. That is not what you are saying. You are saying what is innate in this is that I'm wrong about this fact of how I am solving the threshold problem. You think that that is innate, but that is content, not form. You think that that is an innate idea, that was already in your head the instant you came into existence. That is completely non-Kantian. That is like you've just made a new branch of dogmatic rationalism there, which Kant would completely reject, by the
Sure.
way.
Sure. I don't really care. Like, I feel like also, I don't know.
You
Do you
should.
wanna,
If you're going to use
man? Do you?
Kant, then you should care if you reject.
I feel like you're trying to derail the conversation right now. I feel like you
I'm
don't want
really
to
not.
talk about this. Like, I have asked you a simple question. Like, how would we come to a how would we come to, like, basically the whole thing that you're doing is about conflict resolution. That's basically what you're trying to do, right? And conflict resolution, we have a problem here right now. The problem is that me and you are suffering from the farts of the sky, okay? And it's not really obvious. I think it's for both of us and for no one, it is really obvious whether that's an aggression or not. And we could say the same thing about playing loud music, and we could say the same thing about polluting the water on the ground and blah blah. So there is a bunch of stuff where we are not really where it's not really obvious who is the aggressor and who is not. And I feel like for these cases we can just resort to voting basically on it. That's the most ethical and most just thing to do. And in that moment, the moment we do that, we have basically created public goods that we all own because we're basically controlling it together. And
What was
now you
the
can tell me,
epistemic threshold that you crossed to come to that principle? That we just vote on these things.
what is the
What was the epistemic threshold that you crossed? Because you must believe this thing, right? So then there is some threshold that must have met to make you believe that thing. But hold on, then I can just apply the same fucking criticism to you. Like, do you not see how this is self-defeating?
in logic, you have, like, just like you don't have perfect squares in nature, but you do have perfect squares in mathematics. You don't have binaries in nature, but you do have binaries in logic, right? So not every time,
What threshold did you pass to come
I
to
don't have
that
to, in order to make a logical statement, in order to make a judgment that comes from my logic, I don't have to cross any threshold. That doesn't follow directly from what I'm saying. What I'm asking you is a fact of the matter in the world, an empirical fact.
So what was illogical about my statement of the legal theory?
your statement of the legal theory is that you're able to resolve conflict with it, and that you cannot publicly control, like basically you cannot have public ownership of something. Okay, so in your view, you would not be able to publicly own the air, or you cannot publicly own, you cannot have a public right, like a common right of all of the people that are living in this cave, to silence, to clean air, to not being polluted, and all of these things. Like basically there is no public right to it in your system, in your concept, right? And I'm saying that is and you're trying to basically make up for it by using the non-aggression principle on an individual basis. But I'm saying that we cannot determine whether the aggression has happened or not in these cases. These are cases where it's basically completely impossible to give an objective net fixed barrier where it crosses your where it basically crosses to your property, and where it infringes on your rights. And the only way we can actually do it is to have like a voting on it, and to determine what is being deemed an aggression or not. Like at what decibel can we talk about like aggression when someone is playing like loud rock music?
So what was illogical about my statement of the legal theory was that I claimed that you cannot have a group property right. But why is that illogical?
Because you claim that your main goal is to solve conflict, and I think this is a case of potential, like basically this needs determination what conflict is, and without that you're basically left with nothing. You can't basically, your theory then is shallow, right?
Okay, so I've determined what conflict is already, in your words. I've said that it's when you initiate conflict itself means mutually exclusive actions. I've already given that, so therefore, it is in fact logical what I claim here. So my statement of the legal theory is indeed logical. So when I'm making a logical statement, I don't need to cross any threshold. By your words, by your principle, because I'm making a logical statement, I don't need to cross any threshold, so the threshold claim is dropped, I flow through.
I don't get that. I don't know. I didn't get that, to be honest.
What don't you get about it?
Like I don't know
What threshold must I meet to make you get this?
Yeah, I don't know where you're getting at with all of this threshold thing. Like it's really easy in nature. When you look at empirical facts, they're all on a spectrum basically, right?
I disagree.
Okay, so you just agreed with me that basically aggressing on someone is just by the facts of, when we look at it as an empirical fact, like when we look at the act of someone aggressing on someone, we can always, like, we can put all of this on a scale, always, right? And then at some point,
For any given empirical fact, for any given literal thing which happened, either it was aggressive or it wasn't.
is me blowing wind in your face, like you are in Scotland right now, right? Or you're in the UK, right? So and now me like basically going out the window and doing this towards Scotland, is that aggression?
No.
No. But is it
But if
more?
you were a giant who could somehow like throw
Yeah.
a gust which destroys my house,
Yeah.
then yeah, it is.
Do you think it's more aggression than me just sitting here, just like even by a tiny bit?
I don't think there is more or less aggression. It's either aggression or it's not.
Okay, but and then we go further, right? I fly to Scotland, and then I basically push some air directly in your face. Is that aggression?
Possibly, possibly not. Depends on the
Okay,
specifics of the
wait.
scenario.
How is this?
It depends upon the specifics of the scenario. This is what I've been trying to tell you this whole time, right? It depends upon the specifics of the scenario.
Wait, why were you able to? Why were you able to?
I can give you the general principles. I can't apply those principles to a case which isn't literally in front of me.
Why weren't you able
Right?
to perfectly answer?
I can't apply the principles to literally a case which doesn't exist.
Why were you able to perfectly answer yes or no in the case where I was
It's
just blowing out of my window?
impossible. It is. I already know that it's impossible for you just going like that, for that to have any effect on me. That is on the way other end of the spectrum. But then as you bring it closer to the threshold point, right, then it becomes muddier. So I can't answer it.
Yeah, I agree, but then you do agree that there is a threshold. That it's not a binary, that everything's on a scale, and that we put a threshold there, and then above that threshold, then you
Threshold
completely
means
agree
there
with
is a
me.
binary.
But
Threshold means there is a binary.
no, threshold means everything's on a spectrum, and we put a threshold there. That's
There
what
is a
threshold
binary
means.
there is a binary in the statement, hey, I want to take all of the numbers above 1 and put them in set A, and all the numbers which are less than or equal to 1, put them in set B. That's a binary. Either it's in set A or it's in set B. But it's got a threshold there. There you go.
Can you? I don't. I feel like I'm really disappointed, man. I'm sad right now. Like, this is really sad. This is saddening because I've seen you like debate, and I feel like I'm not getting the Liquidzulu experience that I was hoping for, because I don't know. I really like the
I
shit.
promise you are.
I mean, it's really an easy question. Like, normally you have basically answers for everything, but I'm asking you like a very simple question. Like, in this case, in this cave, like what would be the criteria for us to determine whether we are able to infringe? Can you let me finish?
I gave you the criterion. It's the non-aggression principle. That's the criterion.
You don't let me
concerned
finish. That's
that
the
I haven't
problem.
given you any
That's the
criteria.
problem. That's the problem.
I gave you the
That's the
criterion.
problem. That's the problem. You don't let me finish. If you would let me finish, then you would hear that I'm saying what would be
I've
the
let you
threshold.
finish a million times,
What would be
and
the
every
threshold?
single time it
What
comes
would
out
be
this
what would
exact
be the
thing.
threshold? What would be the threshold for us to determine what is aggression? And you saying non-aggression, principle to that shows that makes no sense whatsoever, this conversation.
Literally every time you've asked that, I've explained that I can't give you a literal physical threshold. Okay, the only threshold I can give you is the non-aggression principle, which is a general principle. It doesn't apply.
That is
It
not
doesn't
a
give you the
threshold.
specifics on any case, which is not literally happening. It's a general principle which you need to apply to a specific case.
Bro,
I can't explain this any more clearly.
Bro, how do we find out what is aggression? The non-aggression principle. Like, how do we find out what aggression
No.
is?
The way
And
you
you
find
say
out
the
what aggression
non-aggression principle.
is whether it initiates a
It's
fucking
mind blowing.
conflict. Like, this is not a challenging thing.
Okay. Okay. I think we don't have an answer. Basically, what's happening in that situation in your Anarcho-Capitalist? Like, what would
If
happen
that's what
then?
you want to believe, go ahead.
No, I'm asking you, what would physically, literally, what would happen? Like, me and you
take it to a
in
fucking judge.
Okay, what would happen in that? Like, what would the judge do?
He would try and apply the fucking NEP. He would look at whether a conflict
What
was
would the
initiated or
judge
not.
do
Who
to
initiates
find out
conflict?
what aggression, if aggression has happened or not?
I've
He would
explained this
apply
to
the
you
NIP?
several times. You should
Okay.
seriously watch back this debate.
I'm asking you, what
and
would the judge
look
do?
at it.
What would the judge believes in the NIP? What would the judge do to find out whether aggression has happened in this cave or not? Whether he's
He
allowed
looks at
to
whether
infringe?
a conflict has been initiated.
All right.
Because he knows what a conflict means. You know what a conflict means. We all know what a conflict means.
All right.
I'm not speaking esoterically here.
Okay.
This is not challenging.